Hello, and welcome back to the Chris Macpherson Show for another episode of your black and white of sports opinion. No greys here. We're looking forward to digging into another big episode around the sporting world, talking about plenty of different content and topics. And we've got a new co-host joining us a little later in the show. Looking forward to introducing you to them. But in the meantime, it's time to kick it off with Around the Grounds as we do each and every week. And of course, who would we like to bring in? But one of our regulars, Mr. Consistent, it is Lachie Avil from Roundball Australia. Lachie, good to have you with us.
Thanks, Chris. How are we?
Going well, mate. There's a lot going on. There's certainly a lot going on in the football world, which we'll get onto in a little while, and Roundball's been very busy covering that. But there's a few other peculiar and interesting things around the world. I think one of them, our friend Brody Burrows from the Third Man Up podcast, might challenge whether or not it's really sport, but we'll get to that one in a minute. Let's talk about basketball own goals. I don't know if many people have seen, but there's a game. It's the Under-19 World Cup. It's going on at the moment. The Aussies lost their opening game up against the US. They were on the precipice of being knocked out of the tournament in their final pool game against Cameroon, trailing by 6, when one of the Cameroon players got an inbound pass and decided just to dunk it in the net, which at first didn't seem all that peculiar until you realised that was not the net that he was supposed to be scoring in.
Yeah, it was very strange. There's clearly some kind of full court press, a lot of Cameroonians in and around the net trying to force a turnover. And the Australians up the court trying to force a turnover, and it clearly it felt like it was that their scoring end with a lot of defenders around. And I have seen this. I played basketball growing up. I think maybe 2 or 3 times. Just brain snaps of you forget which way you're going. You come in for a timeout or whatever it is, and you just lose it for a split second, and that's all it takes. And you saw the basket. He had the ball, and it was a pretty good dunk, but it proved pretty costly for him in the end.
It certainly did. The game ended up going to overtime. Alex Dickerson tied the game with a 3 with, I think, about 4 seconds left in the first period of overtime to take it into a second period of overtime then. But it was the Aussies that got home, led by Dash Daniels, whose name, obviously, the surname is quite well known, the younger brother of Dyson Daniels, and we'll likely see Dash Daniels in the NBL this year for Melbourne United. So, certainly a good result for the Emus, their under-19s team had taken as their moniker. I think we're running out of Australia.
Yeah, we are.
Is anyone called the Echidnas? I feel like there's an opportunity there.
What sport would you go? I wonder. Maybe like a roller derby or something. I don't know.
I was going fencing.
Yeah, no, good from you. Yep, I don't mind it.
We'll start the campaign. We'll start the hashtag Australian Fencing Echidnas.
I like it.
Very much confused with people that put up fences and find echidnas. But anyway, time for to move on, and let's talk about things that are going to aggravate Brody Burrows if he's tuned in. Jake Paul is now a ranked fighter and could eventually fight for a world title. And I was going to say, is this fact or cat? Well, it's fact, Lockie, but it's just madness and bizarre.
So get me up to speed, Chris. I know the fight happened the other day. Did he win?
Yeah, so Jake Paul is now ranked at number 14 after he's now eligible to challenge the world champion. So before the fight that he had, it would rank Paul if he defeated Chavez that he was fighting. He outworked him. Chavez looked like he didn't want to be there, I'm going to be honest, over 10 rounds. He got a unanimous decision, so it wasn't exactly a comprehensive win. So he's now ranked 14 in the WBA, and we know boxing's got, 45 different associations that all have their own different belts. You and I can start one. We'll start one later, and we'll give JR the title. That'll be great. See who wants to fight him next. We might make some money out of some promotions. I don't know. But Jake Paul's now ranked number 14. So the influencer turned professional boxer can theoretically challenge the WBA cruiserweight champion Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez for the world championship. Obviously, that needs to be accepted because, again, boxing has its own rules and the way they go about these things. But it's just bizarre because you've got to be a ranked boxer, but now they've ranked him, so that means that obviously that his chances increase if he moves further up the rankings. But this is a guy that a decade ago was not taken seriously by anyone as much outside of just someone doing dumb stuff on the internet. All of a sudden now he's been boxing for a few years and he's had some very questionable fights, we know, and now he could be fighting for a world title in the next 12 to 24 months, and it's got to be a serious consideration for someone like a Ramirez who would hopefully back himself against a Jake Paul, but the draw card of the dollars that come with this influencer boxing, the prize fighting, whatever else you want to call it. I know it gets Brody's ire up, but I'm not really a fan of it. And I do, equate it to being almost a different code of sport. It's a bit like, boxing versus UFC versus ultimate slap fighting or whatever it's called. again, another thing that's a sport. But, I almost see boxing and prize fighting to be different, but this is the crossover now. He's ranked. He's one spot ahead of, a guy like Craig Parker, who's 20-0.
Yeah, I think Jake Paul left the kind of influencer sphere of boxing a little while ago. We've seen maybe a good comparison is probably towards the WWE, which is obviously more entertainment space, but plenty of personalities and characters coming in from different walks of life and different sectors and coming out of it as well. Think the likes of, The Rock and stuff like that. Obviously, Paul has a bit about him in terms of a boxing sense. You could argue he's been very particular. I couldn't tell you many of the names, but I've followed it loosely over the years. You can argue that he's picked his battles well, and he's kind of worked his way up. He clearly has some kind of pro boxing skill about him. Whether he's even close to a world title, I don't know. I'll leave that to the experts. But you're right in the fact that, if you had a world champion that was willing to accept the fight, obviously you probably are going to back your skill, but also it's not an influencer fight. But the fact of his popularity in just the general world and American media, you're right. There's going to be a lot of money on the line probably. So that Paul has that to his benefit, that he can leverage that into getting fights as well if he does want to push this seriously.
I just can't believe that this is a guy that's now within striking distance of a world title when the last guy he fought was nearly 40, looked like he didn't want to be there. The guy before Tyson, who's about 86, you go back through, he fought, Nate Diaz, Anderson Silva, a bunch of these other guys. Like, he's only had, I think, around about 12, 13 fights. And a bunch of them have been very much fights that I don't think meet the criteria of being legitimate serious fights. I mean, I guess it's always serious when you're in the ring and someone's going to punch you in the face, but yes, it's a bizarre one. But anyway, the world of boxing continues to, cover itself in glory. I think, to your point, I think we do need to acknowledge to an extent that there is, as you said, there's something about Jake Paul's boxing that is clearly, he's holding his own. He's 12-1. He's only lost the one fight, which was to Tommy Fury, who, we know his pedigree in boxing. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he's viewed if he starts to take on some of these top 10 boxers in the cruiserweight division in the WBA and these sorts of things, or what happens next. I think it's an interesting narrative. It could either prove a lot of people right or prove a lot of people very wrong, including myself.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if I really care to speak about it too much more. I'm kind of with Brody. It's just like, this is whatever. This is an entertainment play. Good on him. Go punch some people in the face and see what happens.
The fine line between sports and entertainment. I'll tell you what, somewhere where there has been a lot of sport and a lot of entertainment has been Wimbledon. We've been doing some Daily Dose episodes with Christian Monaghan from the First Serve, who also does some moonlighting on Roundball Australia. The man is everywhere. Mm-hmm. Wimbledon, 23 seeds across the men's and the women's fell in the first round. 4 of the top 10 in the men's, 4 of the top 10 in the women's. It is absolute carnage, but with carnage comes opportunity.
Yeah, opportunity as well. I was watching the first night's broadcast and, good old Brenton Speed taking us through the night, and, they just kept cutting across to different courts of one by one. All of these big names were getting knocked out. It's opportunity, especially a tournament like Wimbledon, which obviously stands alone in terms of its history and the desire for a lot of players to win it internationally. And hopefully we can get one of those stories of just a player that has just come through kind of against the odds, and the draw will be easier in certain parts, as you say. And there has already been, a lot of surprises. So it's really exciting, and hopefully one of our Aussies can sneak their way through.
Yeah, it wasn't a great day for the Aussies on the first day. I think we lost somewhere in the range of 6 of our 7. Jordan Thompson was the only one that went through to the second round. Obviously, the Demon did get a win up in the first round as well, so he will go through. Alex Vucic won, Rinky Hijikata won as well. So we've got a few Aussies that'll be in action on Thursday night as we go into this. We'll know the Jordan Thompson result. We're sort of recording around the time of his match. Dario Kazatkina as well. So there's a handful there, but there's going to be some interesting stories that emerge out of these ones where a lot of the seeds fall. Of course, there's lots of people. Christian and I had a conversation this morning, and he sort of said, oh my goodness, it's so dangerous. Oh, hang on. No, Carlos Alcaraz and Yannick Sinner are still in the men's, so they'll just play finals. Those Novak Djokovic. So yes, some big names have fallen, but there's still plenty of big names there. The women's is probably the biggest piece because the 2nd, 3rd, and 5th seed have all fallen already. You got to feel for Zhong Xin Wen. She's been knocked out as a seed 2 times in 3 years in the first round by the same player in Katerina Siniakova. So That's the world's number one doubles player beater there. But yeah, certainly interesting. And I, like you, will be watching a little bit of the tennis as it develops over the next couple of weeks. It's a good add-on to some of the soccer that we'll talk about later. And yeah, certainly plenty happening. And as you said, Brenton Speed there, bringing it all back to Australia because he's the only man in more spots than Christian Montagan at the moment.
Yeah, Speedy loves to get around, doesn't he? He's kind of always been that. But it'd be disrespectful to say jack of all trades because he does his job very well. He's a master of a lot of them. And he's a very, very familiar sporting voice, and it's good to have him there.
Very versatile man, isn't he? I mean, he almost called what should have been the winner of the Puskás Award for Riley McGraw, right? So, and called it wonderfully too. It still sits in my memory. I can hear it as I say about it now. So, yeah, if our dabbles in a little bit of semi-professional commentary, Lockie, are ever as successful as Speedy's, I think we'd be very happy men. But that does bring us to a close of Around the Grounds. We might just take a little breather, mate, and we might dig straight back into the soccer when you're ready.
Sounds good.
It's time to talk football, or the round ball more fittingly. And of course, if we're going to talk the round ball, let's go to the team from Round Ball Australia, and we've got their leader, their chief in morale, I guess. I kind of lost myself there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess morale is part of the gig. Yeah, you're not wrong.
Look, you're the Pied Piper of the merry band. Let's go with that. Mate, there's lots happening in the football world as we touched on off the top. Let's start, of course, the Matildas are in their international window at the moment, getting through lots of football, mostly over in the West there. They've had a couple of games against Slovenia in a week or so ago, in the last week, I guess, since we last recorded, and they've got a couple coming up. So what have you taken from those games against Slovenia, a win and a draw, and what are we looking to when we shape up for Panama?
Yeah, it's been a fascinating week or so. Obviously, the first game, the 3-0 win, was a great result. Pretty poor performance, really. Got a little bit lucky. And then the 1-1 game where they didn't get the result was significantly the better performance, which has, been really, really fun for all the people that love to check the score lines and then use that as the basis of their Twitter threads. But it's been really fascinating. There's been a really clear directive from Montemurro that they want to be able to hold the ball and build out from the back and move it around in possession and really take care of it. And it's gotten themselves into some trouble, releasing some turnovers and some really poor positions. However, what we learnt from, the Chronicles of Ange Postecoglou, and obviously that story has gone around a lot, is that when you're trying to institute that style of play in a team, first you have to suffer. And that's what these friendlies are for. It's not really to get a result. We could see some of the questions that Montemurro was being asked after the games, and he clearly had a bit of contempt for any suggestion that the result mattered at all. It wasn't about that. It's about implementing a game style. They've got a schedule that he reckons they're ahead of in terms of implementing that in the team, and obviously now it's about going into this Panama series and continuing that with a bunch of new faces that are coming in. We're getting a little bit of squad rotation from the Slovenia games, and then planning a course forward, and what are the friendlies that we come up against in the next 7 or 8 months before the Asian Cup, and how can we continue building? So you're going to see a lot more changes. The Matildas are still going to be brave trying to build up from the back and take those risks, because when they come up against the best side of the world, or sides in the world, at the Asian Cup and then hopefully at a World Cup after that, they want to have a style of football that is capable of beating those teams. So it's all good and well to get a kind of lucky 3-0 win against Slovenia, but that was not the purpose of that game.
No, certainly not. And I guess, what do we expect from these Panama games? You talked about squad rotation. It's still obviously that focus on building a style of play and building that across a broader range of players, I guess, as Montemurro tries to lay his impact. So focus still not on results, but should we be getting the better of these sides in terms of the overall, or this side in terms of overall play, do you expect?
Yeah, we absolutely should. For me, I don't really consider the opposition to be a factor, or really, to put it bluntly like that. They're just the other team that we're getting minutes against and getting reps in. So I'm not exactly sure what kind of a challenge Panama will present on the field. But it's just the same thing. It's just another game of football. Obviously, we've seen all these games in Perth as well. For me, that just seems like they just want to cut down on travel and just make sure that there's as many training sessions as possible. 7 or 8 new players that weren't part of that Slovenia series will have to get up to speed with the methods and the intent from the coach. And I think it's good. You want to spread that pretty wide early on, so within a couple of windows, Joe has a pretty clear idea of maybe who his best kind of 20 players are. And then you really start to zero in and think about roles. We saw Alana Kennedy playing in midfield rather than at centre back in that second game. I think that's a really smart move. We know that she has had a defensive mistake, once in a while, but being in that midfield position, she's going to be defensively minded. So as we get kind of other players in different positions moving a little bit more freely around the park to try and advance the ball, Alana Kennedy is going to be there in midfield to mop up. So there's going to continue to see those kind of changes, maybe some players and positions that you don't quite expect. But this is the time for experimentation early, and then we can zero in on what we really need.
Yeah, well, we certainly know that the games are coming ahead thick and fast. Saturday and Tuesday, if memory serves. I think Saturday's the game they're taking down to Bunbury, which will be a great experience for the town of Bunbury. I don't think anyone in their wildest expectations in downtown Bunbury would have expected they'd be hosting what is essentially Australia's biggest national sporting team in terms of profile at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're going to go out there for 4 games in Perth, as we said, 3 of them at HVF Park, you may as well. You may as well go down to a town like Bunbury and share it around. Obviously, we've seen ever since the World Cup, they've kind of done the country tour, go around to all the different capital cities and tick off the big stadiums and sell them out. And now the focus is very different. There's been a tonal shift since the failures of the Olympic Games and the She Believes Cup. Is that with the new coach and with the Asian Cup on the horizon, it's not just come a long way to the Matildas anymore. It's let's put a really good team together that can compete for trophies. So hence the decision, again, to just stay in WA and allow for more training time rather than travelling around. And if you're going to be there for the whole time, then you may as well go to a place like Bunbury and give people that opportunity.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that goes. And, we do love seeing it going back to the grassroots. So while it's challenging because it limits a few fans, it is a great story in itself nonetheless. And a lot of them will get to see a lot of their heroes, including WA native Sam Kerr, who's back around the squad, and some of these other players that are from over that way. So we like that. And, we wish the Matildas all the best and hopefully see those building blocks continue to keep, to use Joe Montemuro as well, it's ahead of schedule.
Yeah, absolutely. Ahead of schedule is a good line. It was fun listening to his post-match press conference, actually. He's very open about his tactics and his philosophy, which was cool. I love talking to Jacob the other day about his line of, we all like to feel comfortable in our 4-3-3s and our bingo numbers and Tats Lotto numbers and what the modern football game presents in terms of positions and stuff like that. But yeah, he's good value, Joe, and best of luck to him moving forward.
Yeah, we certainly want to see him and the girls continue to succeed. Speaking of some more regional ventures and smaller areas, let's talk about the Australia Cup round of 32. There's certainly some surprise packets in it. We've got 2 slates of games here to look through, and I think about 5 match days across the round of 32. Lockyer, we did a video picking this apart in the Daily Dose the other week, so if you do want a bit more detail on it, you can certainly check that out, or there's also some content on Round Ball Australia with it. But I guess in terms of it, let's just pick out two from each of these slides in terms of the match days. And let's talk, the one that's got both of us excited is this Darwin Olympic versus Nunawading City on day 1. Darwin Olympic, the NT sides have never made it past the round of 32. Nunawading City are coming from the 4th tier of Australian football, the 3rd tier in Victoria. They've qualified through. They're the giant killers already. They get to go up to Darwin in the middle of winter, where it's about -5 degrees in suburban Victoria, to Darwin, where it's probably going to be in the high 20s. The boys will come back with a tan. How do you rate their chances of coming back with a win?
Oh, this is a fascinating thing, right? One of the cool things about this competition is that we get to compare the different state competitions, and obviously we do see a lot of Victorian and New South Wales teams getting through, and it speaks to the quality of those competitions. But something like a Northern Territory side, which of course doesn't actually have NPL status, going against a 3rd-tier Victorian side is just such a crazy combination. It kind of goes beyond any logical predictions. Hopefully, it's a good game. If we're considering a Darwin team that, the Northern Territory, as you say, has never had a winner in the national stages of the Australia Cup. The 3rd tier of Victoria has had a winner in the national stages of the Australia Cup in Melbourne, Serbia. Last time out, they got through to the round of 16. So hopefully it's going to be a close battle. And again, it's this story, this magic of the cup, 2 underdogs that get to go against each other, and one of them will progress. So yeah, really excited about that one.
Yeah, I think the strike rate is something like 50%, where the NT side qualifying through, they've got a huge record of having home games, and one of the big reasons of that is that they've drawn notoriously a number of A-League clubs going up there, which the A-League clubs must love it in pre-season, but it'll be a great adventure for the boys from Nunawading City. I'm sure when they entered the Australia Cup in the early preliminary rounds, they weren't expecting that was going to take them to Darwin, but as you said, that is the magic of the Cup. Let's go to the end of the spectrum when we're talking about the levels of these teams. Let's head to the bottom game on this slate. There's quite a few. As we said, we picked apart a couple of these other ones in our preview. But the Perth Glory versus the Wellington Phoenix, and I know you've got a fun little tidbit and fact about this that you tweeted probably about a week ago when we did our video.
Yeah, this one's really funny. So for those of you that would have watched the playoffs in Darwin a little over a month ago now, you would have seen the Wellington Phoenix defeat the Brisbane Roar to earn their place in this round of 32. And long before that game had even taken place, there were rumours going around that Scott Wooden and Sam Sutton, two of the Wellington defenders, were on their way to Perth at the end of the season, and those transfers came true in the last couple of weeks. And, as most would assume in cup competitions, despite transfers, not often does it happen at the end of a season, but definitely in mid-season, if you transfer, then you get cup tied and you can't play for a different team. However, there is an exception in the regulations for these playoff games that occurred for A-League clubs before the current transfer window opened, which, that criteria does fit those games that were played a couple of weeks ago. So those two players, Sam Sutton and Scott Wooden, not only earned their place in the round of 32 with Wellington by beating the Brisbane Roar, but they are now eligible to play for Perth Glory against the Wellington Phoenix in the next phase of the same competition, which is going to be really, really fun when it comes out. But this Perth side, for me, I've got my eyes on them as one of the Smokies to make a real run up in the A-League next season. I think I've even put on the public record on social media that I have them in the top 4 at this point in the preseason. So they've got a really, really solid defence boosted by those two and Brian Kaltak as well, who shifted over from the Mariners. So given the travel as well, obviously the OG distance derby, Phoenix and Sheafy having to fly over, I reckon Perth Glory are going to give them a really good run.
It's a good one. This one, it should be all eyes of the football community because it's a standalone game on the Sunday. We've got the match days on the sort of Tuesday and Wednesday of either the weeks either side. And interesting that this is the only game on the Sunday, despite there being, much to the dismay of our friend Paletti, 3 all A-League clashes. They wanted to see all the A-League teams drawn against member federations and travelling out to the corners of the globe, but that is not the case. But let's take a look at the second slide of games. And again, there's lots to pick apart here. I know Paletti's very excited about that SD Raiders MacArthur FC local derby. But the one that I'm excited about, and we did talk about this one a little bit, but the Gold Coast Knights versus Auckland FC. It's Auckland's first adventure into the Australia Cup. And they will head to the Croatian Sports Centre, which is exactly what it sounds like. Gold Coast Knights, one of a number of teams. Again, we talked about this in the video with Croatian heritage in this round of 32. It's going to be something like the Auckland FC squad as a squad have never experienced before heading up there.
Yeah, it is going to be different. It's a very unique scenario for Auckland FC coming in. Obviously, with these cup games, especially the early ones, the round of 32, very early in pre-season. A lot of clubs in the A-League are only just returning to pre-season this week as we're recording. We see sometimes a little bit of rotation. But for Auckland FC in their current form, it's actually very hard to pick a side that doesn't have a lot of experience behind it. They don't have an academy. They do have a reserve team that has just kicked off, a couple of weeks ago playing over in New Zealand, or maybe a couple of months ago. But this winter season is their first year. So it's going to be very hard to rotate too much. And, their first team coming back, they're going to want to play competitive football. And, they won the premiership at their first time of asking in the A-League. I'm sure they're going to win the Australia Cup or want to win that competition in the first time of asking as well. And, there's that kind of rivalry with the Phoenix. They want to be the first team to get this piece of silverware as well. So I see them taking this very seriously, and that makes it a very tough gig for the Gold Coast Knights.
Yeah, it certainly does. It'll be interesting. Maybe they need to sign, a former PE teacher out of Auckland City, go from playing Boca Juniors to the Gold Coast in a couple of weeks. Wouldn't that be something? Christian Gray. Again, I've only just actually penny dropped on what his name is, also used for. Anyway, Christian Gray, well done, PE teacher. I'm sure the kids love that as a school teacher name. If you haven't again seen our conversation on that, we talked about that last week around the Auckland City Club World Cup, which we'll get to in a moment. The last one I want to have a chat about here, and we did go a little bit in depth on this one on the video as well, but it's the last game on that slate, and it's and I'll put this in inverted commas, the giant killers Apia Leichhardt. We know what they've done before. They've knocked out the Wanderers. They've knocked out Melbourne Victory in this competition. and they will be rubbing their hands together. They are one of the few teams that would have very keenly, not just for gate numbers, welcomed an A-League team, and they get the champions in Melbourne City.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we say, this is the time to get them. If you want those giant killings early on before they get too much momentum in the cup, don't let them get too much preseason in their legs. That's the opportunity. So Melbourne City are definitely going to have a very, very talented squad. We saw last A-League season the ease of which they introduced members of their academy into their first team. And that goes just down to how that academy is built and the youth pathways that they've created. So even if they do rotate, they're going to have a very quality side available. But as we say, it's, do you want to take so many players out of a VPL 1 side that is challenging for promotion and doing it very well at the moment? Do you want to disrupt that group too much for a little bit of a run in the cup? Or do you want to stick with your senior players? And look at the fact that they're traveling to Apia with that history. Of course, they're going to be garnering momentum as well as they move towards the Australian Championship. They're going to want to make another imprint on this competition. So when we were looking at the kind of member-fed versus A-League teams, yeah, absolutely, Apia look like one of the favourites. If there is going to be an upset, they're probably one of the most likely to do so.
Yeah, well, they're a side, Melbourne City, that bombed out in the first round last year at Perth, so they'll be looking to go a little better than that, but we'll wait and see how that all shapes up. Let's move on to, the other end of the world in knockout football, from domestic cup competition to Club World Cup competition, and we're getting to the pointy end of the Club World Cup, and I know you're going to very much relish talking to me about how my Manchester City bombed out to Al Hilal.
Yeah, absolutely. This is an amazing game. This is the game of the tournament for me. Obviously, I have the bias with the Asian influence and really wanting these AFC teams to do well. But it was a cracking game of football. 4-3 to Al Hilal. For those who hadn't seen, we saw Manchester City get up quite early through a bit of a lucky goal. And, it was within the first 10 minutes and you're kind of thinking, oh, here we go. All the hope just kind of died out. But credit to Al Hilal. They were awesome. I think their coach Inzaghi said after the game, some kind of analogy like we had to climb Mount Everest without oxygen or something, and we did it. It was quite the Herculean effort. And this is a massive moment, not just for Al Hilal, not just for Saudi Arabian football, but for Asian football as a whole. I haven't checked the stats in detail, but given the format of the previous World Cup, I'd hazard a guess to say this is potentially the first time an AFC team has ever beaten a UEFA team in competition. At least on the men's side, which would just be a guess, but it sounds pretty likely. Obviously, they made the final a couple of years ago when they did win the Champions League that qualified them for this competition as well. But this is extraordinary. This is the moment. This is the Manchester City team that, ironically, if it's probably them or PSG, it was the best case scenario because obviously, there are complaints about this Al Hilal side and where they got all their money and quality from. But the beauty of this fixture is that you can have all those same complaints from Manchester City, and often to a larger extent as well. So, for a game of football that on paper isn't so pure, this win feels more pure than it could have been, and it feels like a real victory for Asian football.
It certainly does feel like a great result for Asian football, as you said. It's given them the opportunity, and we know they had a draw against Real Madrid as well. They've really shown what Asian football can deliver. And yes, you can, and I did ironically in our chat talk about, the source of their money being a Man City fan. It's quite, very ironic and humorous to, poke fun at where their money's come from. At the end of the day, this money is infiltrating football in lots of different places. So, they're all there on what I'll call a level playing field. But we know that the depth of that playing field has never been one that Asia has led. And for them to get through into the quarterfinals is, as you say, a huge progression. And it certainly wasn't the only, shock result. I guess, Fluminense from Brazil as well, getting through at the expense of Inter was a big upset. But, there's some of those big names there as well. And, so we've now got on one side of the draw, though, 2 South American teams, an Asian team and Chelsea.
Yeah.
Aren't quite at the peak of their powers or haven't been in recent times, but they are making their way back there. And then you look at the other side of the draw and you've got PSG, Bayern Munich, Real Madrid, and Borussia Dortmund. So it is the who's who, minus England and Italy of European football on one side, up against some absolutely phenomenal stories. And look, I have no ill will really towards Chelsea, but I'd love if Palmeiras could win and Al Hilal could win, so that you ended up with a Asia, South America matchup heading into a final. That would be some story.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the worst case scenario was that we get to even the semi-finals was probably a realistic possibility, and having just all European teams. And that's not going to happen. There's going to be at least one either South American or Asian team with a Fluminense versus Al Hilal game, which is really exciting. And then, yeah, hopefully is just not a European final. So if Chelsea get beat in one of those two games, they can do it against Palmeiras or one of the other two. That's, either's fine by me. But have a bit of a clash of the world at the World Cup, I think would be good for me. And, it's been one of the really fun parts of this tournament to see these kind of culture clashes between sides from all over the world. And I think it's good that a lot of the European teams, the PSG, Bayern Munich, Real Madrid, Dortmund, they're going up against each other now, and hopefully they can knock each other out and we can get some cool matchups in the conclusion of this tournament.
Yeah, look, if I have my pick, I'd love to see Dortmund versus Al Hilal in the final. The scenes then, or Al Hilal against Real Madrid would be quite cool too, to play them again and maybe go one better. They've mixed it with Man City, so they know they've got the ability. They mix it with Real Madrid for 90. It's going to be great to see. The quarterfinals are Saturday and Sunday Australian time. Well worth dragging yourself. We don't have to drag yourself up all that early if you're on the East Coast for the games on Saturday, 5 a.m. and 11 a.m. On Sunday, those European clashes are 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. Eastern. So if you're on the Western side, maybe stay up late for the PSG Bayern game. But yeah, they're not the worst time slots. They're not the best. There's a good mix there where you should be able to get a couple of them in though, Lockie, and I can't wait. That then leads into midweek semis, and then the early hours of Monday the week after, we'll be looking at the final. So we'll certainly be able to have a bit of a chat after it's all wrapped up again, or we might even do a bit of a daily dose popping in between the semi-finals.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, that 11 a.m. time slot is almost over, which is very unfortunate. That was very enjoyable for me. I think, as you say, it's mostly 5 o'clock from here on out. At least the semi-finals and the finals are. So maybe an early morning for the final. We'll see. We'll see what the matchup is. I'm not quite sure how much I want to commit to that. Actually, that's the day after I get back into Melbourne, so I'm probably going to be pretty knackered as well. So we'll have to see how we turn out. But yeah, keen to talk to you about it on the show.
Certainly made some road commitments previously to getting up.
Yes, that I regret as well.
You're learning. I'm not going to try and hold you to committing if I'll make the final that we'll do a live stream on Round Ball. We'll talk about that as it comes closer. You're shaking your head saying no?
No, no way.
Let's move on to women's football, the Women's Euros. And Lockie, as much as you are a very proud Australian man, there we go. We got there eventually. I am struggling with speech today. You are of English heritage, and look, the trophies have been a bit thin on the ground in terms of international ones for England in recent times. Your under-19s just retained their title, and now your women are heading to the Euros to retain theirs. But they're in a really tough group here for many neutral fans. France and the Netherlands in that pool. Wales at the first time of asking. England are never too worried about Wales. I say that as a man with some Welsh heritage.
Yeah, well, I actually have a really special connection to this team, to be honest. I have just happened through some other events, happened to be in the UK during the last European Championship. So I was there and kind of felt the buzz of this team and what they were doing for women's football even there. I saw the Lionesses play twice, including the final in Australia for the World Cup as well, which is really, really cool. So I'm really invested in this team and hopefully they can go on and be successful again in this tournament. What they've done, the way that the English talk about their national team compared to the way that we talk about ours in Australia is very similar in terms of what they've done for women's football and women's sport. So it's very special. And yeah, you're right. The football side of it's a very competitive group and you are going to get that. It's a 16-team tournament. So, that the groups are going to be densely packed with quality, especially in Europe. I think you're right. Look, the writing is there that would say that the Wales team was probably towards the bottom. Of course, absolutely anything can happen. But we've seen some really famous battles between this French side before. We know the quality that they have, and then the Netherlands are going to be popping up as well. They've had some quality performances over the past couple of cycles, so it's going to be tough. Some player losses as well for the Lionesses, but hopefully they can bring football home again.
Yeah, certainly some mouth-watering games when you have a look at it in terms of getting things underway. And yeah, when you look at that pool, as you say, there's 3 of the top 11 teams in the world in that one pool for a continental tournament, which is just crazy to think about. And I think England actually kick it off against France on Sunday morning. So their first game is there. So that's going to be a huge one. I'm also looking forward to the Spain-Italy crossover in their pool as well. But you got the likes of Spain, Germany, Sweden, there's a lot of really strong sides, even Denmark and, Iceland sit above Australia in the world rankings currently. So some really good quality football. If you can go and check it out, I guess you can,
talking about time zones, mate, this one is absolutely brutal. 2 and 5 a.m. for every game in the groups. I'm assuming it probably doesn't change for the knockouts as well. That is absolutely brutal.
I'm not sure what the problem with 5 a.m. is. 2 a.m. I'm with you. I'm all there for not having 2 a.m. games, but the good news is that when we get to the quarterfinals, I think, and semifinals, they're all 5 a.m. games. The final, however, is at 2 a.m.
Yeah, no, it's brutal. Like, especially if you had to pick, have a 3-hour gap in the middle of the night. This is the worst possible. 1 a.m. It's okay. You're much more willing to stay up and go through. And 6 a.m. is not a terrible wake up. But this literally for me is the worst possible 2 games you could have. It's brutal.
I'm not about 2 and 3 a.m. games. Once you get past that, I can drag myself out. I'm normally up by 5 anyway. It just means I have to go and do other things at a different time. But it'll be interesting to see. I'll certainly be getting up for France and England, even on a Sunday at 5 a.m. and looking forward to that one. The great news is this could be, and it segues perfectly into our next piece of football news, this could be the last time you really watch Optus Sport, Lockie.
Yeah, well, it will be for most people. This is, I'm trying to think. So obviously we've had this whole saga with Optus Sport selling their asset portfolio over to Stan Sport. Officially, they closed down on the 1st of August, but they will be broadcasting this tournament and Stan as well. So both of those networks are going to be broadcasting this Women's European Championships. And the other competitions, the Premier League, the FA Cup, J1 and the NWSL. So 2 of those competitions will run alongside here as well. But yeah, for most people, this will probably be the last time ever that they watch Optus Sport, because not only have they sold their assets, but they are shutting down as well after 9 very interesting years. It's a very small chapter in football broadcasting in the big picture, but they've made a very significant impact. Obviously, a lot of people will remember them for the 2018 World Cup, where they had to, they had these technical difficulties, had to give over the broadcasting rights to SBS. But they will also be, for me, remembered for their broadcast of the 23 Women's World Cup in Australia. They were the exclusive broadcaster of every single game. Of course, some of the Matildas and big games on 7 as well. But they were the home of that tournament, and what a tournament it was, and all the impacts as we've talked about before. And they were responsible for a lot of that. And they didn't shy away, even though they didn't have really rights on the domestic game, creating content about domestic football. And, their Football Belongs series made a real cultural impact as well, I felt, highlighting some of the community clubs around the country. And they did a really good job. But at the core of it, Optus is a telecommunications company, and that strategy just didn't make sense for them anymore. So, fair few changes. I'm sure Stan will do a great job. I've been watching their Champions League and European coverage, and they do quite a good job as well. So good for the end consumer, I think, that, the Premier League and all these other kind of tournaments all get put in the one place. But some good football content, and it's disappointing in one way that, that will be lost with Optus Sport.
Yeah, there will hopefully be some more positive shoots that come with Stan as it goes. But obviously, I know yourself and the team at Roundball have dug into this quite in depth with a lot more of the nuance to it. So if people do want to know a little bit more about how it's all going to work and what's happening and how you see the ramifications playing out potentially on the future of football in Australia, certainly well worth checking out those. There's some short videos that have been carved out of a couple of episodes as well as the episodes. So check those out on the Roundball Australia page. Before we go, Lockie, I don't think I need to ask you, but I'm going to anyway. I'm going to say that Spain's going to win this. I know if we got Christian on here, he'd say Italy, but I'm assuming it's England going back to back in the women's.
Mate, it's coming home. Absolutely, it's coming home. No doubt about it.
Start singing for us again. You're singing off air before. JR wanted to record that.
Oh, sorry, mate. And if you don't have the recording, I'm not sure if that happened.
Yeah, if a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, it didn't happen. Well, Lockie Avil from Roundball Australia, thank you very much. And of course, if people want to get more football content, head to Roundball Australia's website or their YouTube channel, or you can follow them on your favourite podcast platforms. And Lockie, I look forward to talking to you next week.
Cheers, mate. Me too.
It's now time to move from the round ball into some rugby league, and we're going to focus in predominantly on the women's rugby league, but we're going to talk a little bit of Origin as well. We welcome on a new co-host, a new panelist in Bridget Murphy. Bridget, welcome to the Chris Macpherson Show.
Hey, Chris, thanks for having me.
We've been fortunate to cross paths on a few different things. You're working with the ABC. You're obviously very passionate about your rugby league. As our followers will see very shortly, you're very passionate about the Knights, even more so than you are about your rugby league. But let's start with Origin 3, and I know you're a big Blues fan as well. What have you taken away from these two sides, starting with New South Wales? Not a lot changing in terms of the New South Wales. As a Blues fan, I'm pretty happy with that.
Yeah, definitely. This side is the one that I think a lot of people expected, and definitely I expected as well to see. Very thankful, kind of personally as a Blues fan, to see at this point, I don't want to jinx anything, but Jerome Luai and Nathan Cleary looking like they're fit and well at this stage. They've, of course, been named on there. And when you look at the extended bench, there's not much coverage option. So that's kind of, I guess, a good sign in terms of how they're going with their respective injuries that they've had. I know Jerome Luai was more of a medical issue. I think he had a staph infection for a few days, which sounded pretty awful. So good to see them there. And I did really enjoy seeing them working together in game 2. It was obviously nice to see that Penrith partnership that just did so much for that side over many years back in play. So I think that will be really key. The one thing that we've heard, obviously, in the media the last couple of days, Chris, is, of course, the goal kicking. Zach Lomax out saying that, he wants to stay in that duty, but it will be very interesting to see how that all sort of unfolds, especially if Nathan Cleary is a little bit better than he was in terms of his footwork and health in game 3 than he was in game 2, whether, the goal kicking responsibilities might change.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. It's obviously been a little bit of an Achilles heel for the Blues so far in the series. So certainly one to watch. Obviously, again, we touched on it. You like myself, Newcastle-based games, both, Bradman Best, obviously, in the broader squad, but some of these players like Max King, Payne Haas, Hudson Young, who've all come from the Hunter Valley, and it just continues to be a nice little pathway. And it's a great story in terms of those guys. And Max King particularly is quite a wonderful story of persistence, as well as being a third-generation rugby league player.
Yeah, actually, I went to high school with Max King. He was in the year below me at high school, and always kind of through our high school days, we had an awesome kind of group of really talented boys that were playing footy. Brock Lamb was in my year, and Lincoln Smith and Matt Zopalola, who are obviously doing great things in our local competition, the NRL. But Max, there was always something you kind of would watch, school rugby league games, and you could see something special in him even from those days. And we've heard a lot about his story, this Origin campaign, in terms of, what he's had to fight through to get to the Origin arena, and then to see him get his call up and play really, really well and be really kind of crucial, I think, to the Blues' attacking power. He was doing an incredible job. So really great to see that he's keeping his starting spot. I think he's been a really, really strong option for the Blues, and fingers crossed he will do an amazing job and make us all in the Hunter here really proud.
Yeah, I just love those little side notes when you have a look at these guys, and it's always something that's focused on with Origin with their junior clubs. And obviously we see these juniors at West Maitland, and also Payne, who played at Woodbury, and then Hudson agreed to Brankston, and you speak of players in the NRL, his brother Jaden still getting around as well. So great to see. Let's flip the dice and let's have a look at the Queensland side. And we don't mind too much who we're going to beat. That's okay. As you're probably aware, I'm a Raiders fan despite living in Newcastle, and I was expecting to see a different Raider named in the front row for Queensland this time around. Maybe they need goal kicking, and that's why they brought Josh Papali'i efforts in the other week.
He did do a good job, of course, for that one shot he was given by the Raiders. And I've just noticed my blurred out background is making me look a bit like a Queensland fan. So that's concerning for me personally. But this side, I think, and I said this quite a bit before game 2, is you can, it pains me to compliment Queensland, but you can never write off a Queensland side. And nothing is more dangerous than Queenslanders with a point to prove. And they're going to have a big point to prove in game 3, of course, to snatch the series. That all through the sort of previews and any of the analysis, it was the Blues series to win. And I think with the absence of Kalen Ponga, with his injuries, Liz Frank injury, there is a big responsibilities on the shoulder of Hamiso Tabadai-Fidow. And I think he's a player that could really harness it. We did see what he did last round with the Dolphins, and that was sort of his origin audition, and it was amazing. He had a really, really solid game off the back of quite a bit of criticism of how he's been performing with the Dolphins. So I'm really interested to see how the Hammer kind of steps up in this respect. And I'm really also glad to see that Kurt Mann is staying in the kind of the starting side. I know he's obviously off the bench, but getting that 14 jersey again, because even when Kurt Mann was with the Newcastle Knights, I was always saying that he is almost the perfect 14. I put him up there with players like Connor Watson, who I just think in that 14 jersey, they can come on and they can do a job. And I really think that in game 2, Kurt Mann really exemplified that, and he will be really dangerous for New South Wales, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think, Kurt, probably even more so than Connor, that, Connor gives an edge to quite the same level. I mean, Kurt's played a lot of centre and second row. He can play at 13. He can play at fullback. He can pretty much play anywhere in your, you're probably not throwing him at halfback from 1 through to 6, though, 9. Basically, outside of halfback and front row, Kurt Mann can fill those. Yeah, he was much maligned when he was here at the Knights.
Mm. Yeah, I think he was underused at the Knights, which was a really unfortunate thing. I was really kind of surprised when they let him go, because I think he was getting to a point where he was playing his best football. But what he's been able to then do as a trusted and senior player at the Bulldogs, I think has really been crucial to the Bulldogs' success this year. I think Kurt Mann has had a spectacular season and a half.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's interesting to see the balance with him and Lockie Galvin and a few of the others up there at the Bulldogs. But while we're speaking about maligned former Knights, a man who has had a really interesting journey, and it's actually a really great journey, having seen some of the stuff when he was with the Blackhawks and he went to South Sydney for a little bit. Gemmet Shibasaki, just over 12 months ago, this guy was basically, and I mean this with no disrespect, he was on the rugby league scrap heap.
There was a lot of talk of, should he be considering Super League? Should he considering his rugby league playing future? I love it. I believe I'm complimenting Queensland decisions, but it's that sort of stuff that when you get to passionate origin territory where it's a decider, it's game 3, Queensland will want to be showing that, hey, you said we weren't going to win this one. We want to win this one. And to have Shibasaki coming back into this arena alongside, Papali'i, I think it's going to be good to see some of those boys, those, older boys, that old by rugby league standards, but those older, more vintage boys out there. I would have loved to have seen Dane Gagai as well, but unfortunate for Dane to miss out on a selection there. But, I think it's a really interesting choice from Billy Slater. It'll be interesting to see how it pays off. But I think, it's bringing a little bit more maturity into this squad will be really, really cool to see.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. The one thing that's for sure is that the selections will either be genius or madness based.
Yeah.
Right. So that's going to be the big question as to how that all shapes up, and Billy Slater will undoubtedly be judged by that. And that will be the spectrum of it. But let's move from the state of origin. Let's move on to the main reason we've got you on here is your passion for the women's game in the NRLW. And the NRLW, like a lot of things in women's rugby league, is continuing to grow, and not just in terms of participation numbers, but we've got 2, well, I'll call them new clubs. One of them is definitely a new club, but one's a returning club. And there's actually some interesting ties to Newcastle, the region, and the Knights, with some of their former coaching staff being over there.
Yeah, so the New Zealand Warriors are back in. Their departure from the NRLW a few years ago was very much kind of a COVID-induced departure. It was just with the competition then somewhat in its infancy. By 2020, it was only 2 years into the structure that we know now. They unfortunately did have to bow out. So it is awesome to see the Warriors back. I spoke earlier this week to Andrew Abdo, the NRL CEO, and he said that New Zealand is just crucial to the NRL and the NRLW. And when you look at some of the players, not just in the Warriors, it is mostly built up of Kiwi players, but there are so many Kiwi players at other teams who are doing incredible things. At the Newcastle Knights, we've got several that are really, really key players. Shanice Parker, for instance, one of the Knights' really, really crucial players to what they do. So, when we look at a team that definitely should have been brought back in as an urgent need, the Warriors were at the top of that list. So great to see them back. And yes, the other new team, of course, is the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs, which I think there was a lot of debate of who should have been next, but I think they've made the right decision with the Bulldogs.
You're right. Obviously, the Bulldogs were a leading candidate. There was a number of clubs that probably could have been made an argument for, and that probably speaks volumes to the growth of the women's game. When we're touching back to the Warriors, though, as we said, got the services of Ron Griffiths, who's got a fairly stellar track record in the women's game already in a short period of time.
Absolutely. I mean, 2 premierships with the Newcastle Knights when he was at the helm here in Newcastle shows just how much I think he is a coach there. And this is obviously no criticism to any of the coaches in either the men's or the women's game, but I think he has a very particular grasp on how to lead women, which, the women that you'll get to know over these next couple of weeks watching the competition, they do all agree that the NRLW is not meant to be the exact same as the NRL. And that's a big misconception, that the girls just want to be like the boys and play the same sort of game. It is a slightly different game. And I think Ron Griffiths really knows how to direct young athletes into that mindset and into what professional rugby league is for women, especially because as well, a lot of the girls that he is leading at the Warriors this year, their background is mostly in rugby union. So it will be really interesting to see how Ron Griffiths approaches this season, how things are different maybe from how he managed and coached the Newcastle Knights, where the girls had a pretty well dominant league background. But also I think it just shows that it's a common error that a lot of people will write off the new kids and write off the new clubs and think that they're going to be at the bottom of the table. I think the Warriors will have a really, really strong season this year because of the guidance of Ron Griffiths.
Yeah, I agree. He's headed over there. I think he's taking assistant coach Ian Burke with him as well, who's again back to the Newcastle assistant coach Leach United here. It's really looking interesting. In terms of the way that the competition is shaping up more broadly and how we're looking at it, obviously the Knights are going to be a side that you very much got a fine tooth comb already over. How do you see them shaping up for season 2025?
So, Chris, with the Newcastle Knights, it's going to be a very, very interesting season for them because this is their second year under Ben Jeffries since he joined the club from being the inaugural coach of the North Queensland Cowboys, which before now we're the newest team on the block. So I think with the Newcastle Knights, what they really need to prove is through their halves partners, I think is where their power is going to come through for. So for this first game against the Bulldogs, they've named Georgia Roach at 5'8", Jessie Southwell at halfback. Now, Jessie, of course, coming off the back of a State of Origin series, which I really do think Jessie, her State of Origin series was her moment of maturity. Of course, she wasn't selected for Origin last year, and that was very much sort of not so much a chip on her shoulder. She took it really well, but I think it's almost the moment she needed to have because she has been lauded for so long as this young prodigy, and it's right. She is an incredible player, but being dropped from Origin last year and then being picked and having the series that she did, I think has set her up for success for this 2025 NRLW season. So with a really strong halves partnership with her and Georgia Roach, who is extremely experienced, one of the UK's best female rugby league players that they've produced, coming in here and combining with a new fullback in Betty Walsh as well, and the experience of Olivia Higgins as hooker, the spine is really, really looking good for the Newcastle Knights. It'll just be really interesting to see how that spine performs and links up with the other positions on the field as well.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be interesting to see how those combinations come in. I was really pleased to see, though, when the Knights launched their season recently that they did name Yasmin Clydesdale, who holds a not a unique piece of history anymore, but certainly her and her husband held a piece of history to first male and female couple to have played for the Knights, and they're now no longer the only ones with Millie Elliott as she is now, and Adam Elliott having played for the Knights as well. Yeah,
it was the news that shocked no one in amongst the girls that Yazzie was selected as captain. I was at the launch and I asked a few of the girls that I interviewed there, hey, was it any surprise that Yasmin was picked? And they were like, absolutely not. It would have been weird if it was anyone else. So I think Yasmin very much the selection that was, I don't want to say obvious to kind of discredit what she's done and why she's been picked. But definitely, I think personally, the best person for the job on that side. She just has that level of experience. She's obviously got an education background as well, that she she works in teaching, she works in education. So she is got that ability that when, say, she is speaking with some of these young players that she's going to be leading around the park, that she knows what to say to them, how to lift them up, and how to communicate with them on the field. So I think Yasmin is going to be absolutely incredible at the helm.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing her leading the Knights. It's quite funny. I think maybe just because of the Knights' heritage in the NRLW, a little bit of a softer spot for the girls than I do for the boys, but I've still got my foot in the Raiders. That's where I'm going to segue to our next bit, which is some players to watch. And one that I love watching go around in the women's game is Jemima Taufa for the Raiders, who is just an absolute blockbuster.
Yeah, actually, it's not. I don't want to kind of give your team compliments too much, Chris, because I think my team are going to be incredible. But the Raiders do have really, really strong roster, and Jemima is one of them. In the Pacific Championships, I was on the sideline reporting and calling for the ABC's coverage of that, and she was one that we were just blown away by. She's got a lot, like I've said, a lot of that experience, a lot of just really good footy IQ, and that's something that at the moment in the NRLW, we talk a lot about footy IQ and what it means. And I'm sure a lot of people are like, what are you talking about? She just understands the mechanics and the strategy of rugby league in a really unique way, which is a really good attribute at the moment, because while, the NRLW has been going since 2018, it's still a very new, fresh competition that's developing. So I do think, there's players out there like Jemima Taufa, like Mahalia Murphy from the Eels, and, Kira Dibb at the Cowboys, who've just been in it for a good number of years now, and they just have a really good understanding of what they need to do and what they need to be directing their more junior and inexperienced girls to do. So, yes, I think the Raiders, I'm a little nervous about the Raiders personally, how they're going to go. I think they are a team that are due for a really good run in this competition.
It's an interesting one with a shortened season, how that form piece can play into it. But in terms of, obviously, there's still those headline-grabbing players that, they're the names that are already household names, your Isabel Kellys, your Tamika Uptons, these sorts of players. Who are those players that you just, when they're on, I call them the TV player, the lawn mowing player. When you're out mowing the lawn and you just go, right, they're playing in a game of footy, I'm putting everything down and I'm going to watch them on TV. Who are those players for you?
The Roosters roster has a lot of them. Which, they're, of course, the premiers, the reigning premiers going into this season. You're right, Isabel Kelly is one of them. Jess Surgis as well is another player at the Roosters who just packs a lot of punch. She's a Dahlia medalist, and she's been around the game for quite a while. And Olivia Kernick, of course, as well, the current Dahlia medalist, also plays for the Roosters. I mentioned before Kira Dibb. I think she's a really fantastic player that has matured since becoming the inaugural captain of the North Queensland Cowboys. She's been a bit of a journeywoman in terms of where she's played. She was, of course, formerly at the Newcastle Knights and did a really, really great job. I think was one of those players that really helped Jessie Southwell get to where she is, because, of course, Kira Dibb plays a bit in the halves, but is so versatile. She plays at fullback when she needs to. She's a really strong player. But the one player who I got to interview earlier this week at the launch, who I just kind of stopped and was almost like, oh my goodness, was Tiana Penatani-Gray. So she is just phenomenal. And what she does at Cronulla, I think she just... I can't even put into words the sort of superstar she is at the moment. She works with us a little bit here at the ABC with Pacific Sports Show as well. And she's just so cool. I know that's not a very insightful way to kind of put it, but she is just so cool. And I think it's really awesome that she was selected for the cover of the NRL 26 video game alongside Nathan Cleary. And they're both given equal prominence on the cover, which I'm just so excited about.
It is great to see as we see that development of the women's game and young girls having something to aspire to, not just on the TV, but as you say, in the new game that's coming out, which is really exciting. Look, there's a lot of things to be excited about in terms of this competition. You talked before about Georgia Roche. There's a few other Poms coming out to join the competition, which is expanding this total. We've got Holly Mae Dodd at the Raiders. Paige Travis is gone to Parramatta, and you've got Goldthorpe up there at the Cowboys as well. So I'm excited to see that. Another one that's caught my eye watching some of the Pathways footy over the last couple of years, and I'm really looking for her to make a big impact at a Dragon side that I feel just needs some more punches. Indy Bostock, she's young, under-19 centre. She looks like she's going to be really exciting and could be, the next Jess Surgis, Isabel Kelly style of player.
Yeah, Indy had an absolute ripper with the under-19s Origin New South Wales side. She had such a strong game. And for someone who is just 19 to be playing the style of footy that she is playing is really, really encouraging to see, really, because she, the Jessies of the competition, she'll be around for quite many years to come. She is the younger sister of Jack Bostock from the Dolphins, of course, who, we all, of course, hope Jack's going well with the really, really unfortunate sort of season-ending injury that he did pick up. But yeah, Indy is an absolute powerhouse. She has so much energy and so much flair to her footy. That is just really refreshing to see at the moment. It's nice, and I've noticed this with a number of girls, it is really nice to see young women who are playing this game find their own style and be brave enough to find their own style. One player for the Knights that I think is really developing really well is Eva McEwen, a young second rower. Another one who's got an older brother playing in the NRL in Jermaine McEwen. But Eva really, when she gets out there and she absolutely rips in, she's playing her own brand of football, which is really cool. And, she's, for a defensive player mostly, she isn't afraid to put her head down and get into the ruck and really try and make some line breaks and take those strong hit-ups, which something that in the women's game has been developing, but is seen sort of as a risky sort of play in a way. So, yeah, Indy, I think, will be the next Jess Surgis. I think you're right in making that call. And, yeah, there's a lot of young girls out there that are just making their mark on this game, which is just awesome.
Yeah, I guess to your point, we fall into that trap often, both in the men's and women's game, talking about the next Andrew Johns, the next Nathan Cleary, the next Jess Surgis. Let's hope Indy Bostock is the next Indy Bostock, and as you say, makes her own way. But competition gets underway this weekend. We've got a slate of games, and we now sit in a position where we've got 6 games for an opening round, which is exciting to see. Kicking off Thursday night, so just after the show, everyone can wrap up listening to this and tune straight into the Sharks versus the Eels. It's going to be an interesting round. The Knights, though, they get the first chance to take on the Bulldogs.
Yeah, this one's a big one. It's going to be a big double header as well, with the Bulldogs men's side hosting this one. The women's side will be obviously first up, so it'll be their big grand debut. I know that there was a little bit of angst amongst some of the Bulldogs kind of organisers and faithful that really wanted the girls to debut at Belmore. I was talking to actually the Bulldogs this time last year, kind of doing a bit of an update of how they were going. And that was the big thing. They wanted to debut at Belmore. So I think, though, kind of the compromise of playing at the really big stadium with the boys is going to be amazing, because hopefully, fingers and toes crossed, those Bulldogs fans get out there to see their girls, and Knights fans hop on the M1, drive down if you can and support the Newcastle Knights. This one's going to be huge. Looking at the Bulldogs roster, I think the concern that I have as very proud Knights fan, and I'm not on the clock at the moment with the ABC, so I'm allowed to be biased in my opinion. I think the Knights could potentially fall victim to going into this one a little bit comfortable, and I hope they're not doing that in a way, because, you look at, hey, this is the new club, the new team, walk in the park is my concern. And we do, for the Newcastle Knights, there are some of those key players who have remained, which we've talked about before. Of course, Yasmin Clydesdale, Olivia Higgins, Georgia Roach, Jessie Southwell, and, Shanice Parker out on the edges, things like that. The thing with the Bulldogs that not a lot of people that are kind of outside of that area wouldn't know is they have a really extensive junior system that's been in place for years. So they're under 17s women's side of the defending Lisa Fiola Cup champions. They had a really great run of things in the Tasha Gale competition last year. So they are a force to be reckoned with, and they have brought up a fair few of their successful juniors. They haven't brought in a lot of talent. So I think they're going, I'm going to tip the Knights, because, of course. But I think the Bulldogs will have a really solid crack at this one.
Well, it's certainly going to be an interesting one. I do like to looking through the squads, and I noticed that Liv Higgins out of action for this game. Morris comes in, which is, again, part of that development system the Knights have got. But there's a very familiar name sitting on the Bulldogs bench, a name that is very replete through the NRL in recent years. Another of the progeny of John Hopewadi, his daughter, Kalasipani Hopewadi, is out there. My goodness, what a family of footballers.
I know. I swear, it's been as of late, you look at some of these development sides and junior sides for different competitions, and you're seeing so many familiar surnames. But you're right, the Hopowadis, they're here, there, and everywhere. And you Google everyone that you kind of see, and they're like, oh, it's a cousin, oh, it's a niece, oh, it's a daughter. So it's really awesome to see that some of that, I guess, wisdom is being passed down. We kind of get to thinking of father to son or grandfather to grandson, but now it's getting to be a bit of a norm that it's, father to daughter, and one day it'll be mother to daughter. You look at stars like Caitlin Johnston-Green is a new mum. Millie Elliott's going to be a new mum soon. And they've got good rugby league pedigrees, those kids. So maybe one day we'll see them in the Tom competitions as well.
Exactly right. We might see a Knights team with another Clydesdale, another drag them back this way, all these sorts of things. And yeah, I mean, you see some of these great family connections. You talked the Roosters before and how strong they are. The connection of Jasmine Strange, her brother Ethan playing at the Raiders, her dad John is coaching. It's rugby league. It's a family game. We love that. But now, Bridget, the time is come, and lean with your bias, lean against your bias. We're going to put our money where our mouth is. Well, our proverbial money, let's be fair. Our top four and our premiers. And so the top four doesn't have to be in order. I just want to know who get through to the final four teams, and then who is going to take it out on grand final day. So I'm going to put my four first, and then I'm going to let you do your four premier, and then I'll do my premier. So I've got the Knights just missing out. I've got the Bulldogs making it in their first year. I've also got the Warriors making it in their first year alongside the Roosters and the Sharks.
All right. Are you doing your premier now, or am I going into my top four?
And I'll do
all right, we'll do our big ones after. So my top four, and this is controversial because it's slightly changed from what I said this time last week on my radio show. So hope no one holds me account to that. I'm going to have the Roosters, the Titans, the Warriors, and the Knights. And the Knights one is not my bias, I promise.
Well, my bias tried to tell me that the Raiders were going to be there, but I just don't think we're quite there. I think we need another year maybe just of settling things down and building on this roster. And that is the interesting thing that's starting to happen in these competitions is, starting to build multi-year deals and these things, which we need to see across women's sport so that, we don't have players that are forced to play two codes. But that's another thing we could probably talk about for hours on end. All right, so who have you got take final day? Is it the Knights or is it one of the other three sides there?
I think it's going to be the Sydney Roosters backing it up and going to consecutive. I just think the experience they have on their roster is at this point unmatched. And, you look at Isabel Kelly and Jess Surgis just being who they are. I just think that they are at this stage, you look at a rugby league team, and I think that they are similar to what we've been seeing in recent years with Penrith. I know, obviously, last year's premiership was their first in only a few years because they had won, I believe it was, 2020 maybe. But they just have an incredible amount of experience and they just know what they're doing. And of course, John Strange coming off the back of the confidence of winning the Origin series as well, I think we'll really do a good job of boosting him up as a coach and giving him a sense of, hey, look, I know what I'm doing here. I can win an Origin series. I can win a premiership. So I just, those two names I mentioned before, with Olivia Kernick and with players like Jasmine Strange hitting kind of a new level of rugby league ability. I think she has really matured since leaving the Knights and going to the Roosters. And also we've got some kind of local links there from the Hunter, which, if they won a comp, I'm okay with. Bridie Parker, if she wins another comp, I'm fine with that. She's a Musselbrook girl. But yeah, I think the Roosters will nab it. I think, though, it'll be a close grand final contest to whoever they're facing. I'm not prepared to say who it's going to be, but I think they will nab it. just from their flair.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say the Roosters actually lose the grand final.
Okay.
Could be my heart a little bit more than my head due to my connection. Assistant coach at the Warriors, Ian Burke. But I see the fairy tale for the Warriors. I think it'd be great for rugby league. I think because the season's that little bit more built out now with the more teams, I think they're going to have enough of a runway for some of these rugby union girls to really take the game by storm. I think it's going to be an all-flair, all-attacking grand final, and the thing I love about the women's game is it's kind of like rugby league transported back to the 90s a lot of the time in terms of what the competition looks like. It's not this wrestle and all of the other things that, is, and again, I don't want to sound like an old wowser that's turning people, that are traditionalists a little bit away from the game that is the men's game. So I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be an absolutely phenomenal season. I can't wait for it to get underway on Thursday night. I'm looking forward to the Raiders' first game. I'll be keeping an eye on the Knights as well when they take on the Dogs. But Bridget Murphy, a big thank you to you for coming on and giving us an absolutely in-depth preview of the NRLW season. We can't wait to catch up with you again later in the season and see how our tips are progressing.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chris.
We head from the stadiums of rugby league to the hot racing tracks of the F1. And when we talk F1, we welcome back in our one and only, the man from the ones and twos, our motorsport guru, JR Carter. JR, nice to see you live on screen, not just working the magic behind the scenes.
Yeah, I've sort of been hidden for the last week or so, and during all that talk about the Queensland side, where I had thoughts as well, but best I keep those to myself at this point. But let's talk some F1 and talk about what happened in Austria. So Lando has actually managed to win a race from pole and not choke throughout the race. It's probably debatable as to whether or not he won it completely on his own, and that there wasn't some help from some other teams to sort of keep Oscar, who was just charging at him the entire race. So, the McLarens ended up 20 seconds ahead of their third place competitors. So, it is McLaren's year at this point, and it really is you've got it. They've got the fastest car, they've got two of the better drivers. Are they the best drivers on the grid? We don't know, but we're seeing this McLaren battle, and we are also seeing them allow that battle to take place. So that's something new and exciting.
Yeah, I do like that. We are waiting for something to come a gutser and make them change their mind on that. But while they're going toe to toe, it's certainly interesting. And so, as you said, Lando takes the win from Oscar, despite Oscar charging on. The Ferrari's third and fourth, which starts to show that they're probably leading the rest of the pack. But as you said, daylight between them. But Oscar, his biggest issue wasn't really with Lando this week.
No, his biggest issue was with his former employees in the Alpine team. And we just got a quick message here I won't read this verbatim, but Alpine has still managed to find ways to cause Oscar problems even after all these years later. Franco Colapinto, just absolute blind move, almost Lance Stroll-like in it, in that he's just moved across and pushed Oscar onto the dirt. Oscar was also, these were lapped cars. This wasn't even battling for a position. Lapped cars ruined Oscar's race. He probably actually had Lando with the pace he had at that point, but because of the flat stops were caused by going on the dirt and just the general around of it, he couldn't come back after that point. And it's just really disappointing to see back markers cause that sort of problem, and a team that's sort of nowhere near actual points getting, causing him problems like that.
Yeah, it's amateur hour, right? This is a team, this is a driver that's got no points this season. This is a team that's got 11 points for their season thanks to Pierre Gasly driving their shopping cart pretty well a couple of times. You've got to be better than that, and, it probably leads into the fact that, Franco Colapinto very much should just be focusing on looking over his shoulder, metaphorically and literally, by the look of his driving.
That's right. So, it's been really well reported that Colapinto was never a long-term prospect for Alpine, where they've really it looked like Silverstone was going to be where the changeover is. We were just discussing off air, it'd be silly to do it this week if they were going to change drivers because you've only got the 1 week turnaround. So we would imagine that at this point, Silverstone, unless he's in top 10 and in decent points, he's probably cooked at this point. There'll be another driver in that car. As for who that is, it could be anybody at this point.
I read something yesterday. I think that there was some surreptitious inquiries, and it'll probably tie in nicely to our next topic, into the man with the mullet, Mr. Valtteri Bottas. And look, I'm happy for any means necessary for getting Valtteri on the grid, outside of maybe sacking Oscar, but anyone else he can have their seat.
Yeah, look, I don't think Valtteri will go for a back marker team again. Like he spent those couple of years at Kick Sauber, and like he's been on record saying that wasn't the right move. But to talk to that point, it looks like Cadillac's drivers lineup is going to be announced sort of imminently. We had a little bit of a what's next moment from Valtteri about a week ago now. Just him walking down the street and seeing a Cadillac and going, "Ooh, should I sit in that seat?" Not yet. So. There's two seats. Like the car had two seats. Like Valtteri was very clear to point that out. So I do think there's definitely conversations about Valtteri going to Cadillac. And I think he'd be keen to join a 21st team just for the sort of prestige of it, like to try and build something from actual scratch. Like I think that's the sort of thing that would appeal to him. Otherwise, he's likely to go to a Merc partner team. If he gets another drive. Someone who has more or less officially ruled themselves out, like had a bit of a talk about his post F1 career today, is Daniel Ricciardo. He's not coming home. Like we're not going to see him back. He's done with it. He's done with the sport at this point. And it's his decision to do that. Like I wouldn't want to see him have just like another absolute terrible couple of years like back behind the wheel, because he didn't enjoy those last couple of years at VCARB, and he certainly didn't enjoy his time at McLaren. So.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it, when you look at that Cadillac? There's also been some rumours this week about Yuki Tsunoda. There's talk that when they get to Silverstone this week, they're holding meetings with a number of drivers, including Checo, Sergio Perez, who's a fairly long way up their wish list. And looking back to the Alpine one, and you talked about, obviously, Valtteri, if he wasn't to get a Cadillac drive next year, he might end up at a Mercedes team. Am I right in saying that Alpine are swapping to Mercedes power next year? So could that possibly be a prompt to maybe bring him in for the last few races just to bet him down if he's not getting that Cadillac drive?
Look, that's a great question though. At the same time, I think the stigma of that team, like Valtteri's smarter than that. Like they've done too much to hurt themselves. Like, and they're constantly sort of shooting themselves in the foot with different things, like in the way that their team's sort of organised. I don't think Valtteri, who's currently standing next to the most sort of efficient man in Formula One, of Toto Wolff, I don't think he's going to go to the Italian Criminals team.
Yes, well, the Italian Criminal, our favourite man of many supermodels and many, many more questionable. Actually, I'm questioning their decisions more than his, but that's another story for another day. Old Flavia. Yeah. Maybe we'll do an expose on him as a after dark special one time.
Oh,
media page, guys. I'll keep directing people to there. The more people I can educate about Flavio Briatore sorted past, the better. If nothing else, it's almost one of those things you read that and you just go, that can't just be one person's life.
That's right. Like Netflix, like with the Drive to Survive stuff, surely they've got like a apple cider vinegar style sort of series they could do for him, like just a recreation of what ridiculous life it was.
They do that. They do those Untold. I feel like that's where we're going here. Like,
yeah.
While we're talking driver changes, there's been a bit of scuttlebutt around about Max Verstappen maybe being on the move.
Yeah, so Max Verstappen with a DNF at the back of the Austrian Grand Prix, and Kimi Antonelli being the one that sort of took him out as well. But they were very pally sort of immediately afterwards. Like there was no harsh words said between the two of them at all. Like both checking on each other, like which is unusual for Max to sort of behave that way towards a driver that's sort of taking him off the track. But the big talk is that and this is sort of coming from Toto himself, is that negotiations have started officially with Max, where they are vying for him to be in that seat in 2026. It looks like that DNF has actually triggered the get out clause for Max, so like he can leave Red Bull at this point because he's guaranteed. At this stage, he's guaranteed there's no Drivers' World Championship this year. Like one of the McLaren boys is going to get that. We hope it's Oscar, but Max is definitely not in contention for it at this stage. Max at Mercedes, it looks like also that George Russell will be the one pushed out. So that's something to keep in mind, where George could end up in Lance Stroll's seat is the next rumor that's getting around. So a couple of big things coming out of the Silverstone Grand Prix weekend, where we sort of start heading towards that summer break and we start getting some answers.
Where does that leave Lance Stroll? Just depot, maybe next stages?
Yeah, I think in the same place Nikita Mazepin is right now, just gone.
I thought you were going to say in Vladimir Putin's inner circle. Sorry, no, next. I did love with that. I did see a nice meme about Toto just speaking to Kimi before the race and just suggesting that he could help Max not help Max make sure that clause wasn't triggered, which was quite funny. The F1 meme game is quite good out there. It's one of
really is.
So, yes, well, we look forward to Silverstone. It's, it's kind of one of the spiritual homes of F1, and we can't wait to see what comes out there. Midnight, I think the race, our time, Sunday night, Monday morning. So there'll be some bleary-eyed, certainly hosts from this show, the two of us and some others on Monday. Please don't judge us if you're in my case, my boss on a Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. I'll deliver everything I need. Yeah, looking forward to it. Looking forward to the season rolling on and seeing what comes in this next 3-week break. But thank you as always, JR. Good to pick apart the F1 world with you.
No worries, all that.
Well, it's been a huge show. A big thank you to you all for tuning in for your black and white of sport, no grey opinions. And a big thank you to our absolute gun co-host coming along with me today, JR Carter, our man on the ones and twos, our motorsport guru, Lachlan Avil from Roundball Australia, and I think you'd agree, on a stellar debut, Bridget Murphy from ABC Sport, covering off all of the rugby league. It was great to chat with Bridget, and undoubtedly she'll be back again to talk footy later in the season. As always, make sure you give us a follow along on your favourite podcast platform, whether that be on YouTube or on Spotify. Make sure to subscribe, hit the notification icon as well. And you can follow us on social media to get some more clips and more information during the week. There's plenty of stuff dropping. Make sure to follow us at The Chris Mac Show. You can follow us on X, on Facebook, on Instagram, and on TikTok. We've got all your generations and all of your platforms covered. And of course, until next week, make sure to keep an eye out for our daily dose episodes dropping. We're covering off on Wimbledon and plenty more. But a big thanks again for tuning in, and we look forward to talking to you about your sporting landscape and all of the black and white opinions again in 7 days.